good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jerome, and this is Psycho Silver. I do hope that today you're counting your wealth in ounces, and also that you're holding your word, especially to yourself. Thank you for joining me again. This is a news show, and we're about to jump right into a whole bunch of news. I scour the internet for hours every evening and try and find the most interesting articles and posts from Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, anywhere I can find some interesting material. And it's always on the topic of sound money, about tangible assets, especially gold and silver. If it's the right kind of cryptocurrency, I want to talk about it. We do geopolitics on this channel, and also what I call the dark psychology of money. And that's just anything about the definite and intentional agenda to turn us all into permanent renters, to ensure that we have no financial education. And the financial education that we do get turns us into impulsive gamblers and nothing better, only able to invest in casino assets. And I want to move as far away from that as possible. And so we're looking into any kind of material that relates to that. And there's plenty of it. Most people right now that consider themselves as investors, they're just gambling. And sorry to say, I see myself doing it at sometimes, but I want to be more aware of this. And I want to bring this topic to light. And I want to identify where this is making its way into the consciousness of the generation of people that should be earning and investing right now. The bottom 50% of people by income only hold 2% of the wealth. And there's a definite agenda to keep it that way and probably even make it worse. And we want to be aware of these things. So with that being said, it's time to get into the news. All right, as promised, I got a whole bunch of interesting news for you. And tonight, we're going to start off on WallstreetBets here. And here we had one user write a 99.91% loss in the stock market. Jay Powell can suck my rod. And this poor chap is down to $105. With the total P&L, he's lost $115,000. Ouch. And of course, I do send my, what's the right word? My condolences. I'm sorry for this person. And this is the dark psychology of money. WallstreetBets is part of the casino. I like to go to WallstreetBets to have a laugh, but what stands out about this is what stands out about this to me. Okay, I don't know this person, and maybe they have money they can throw away, but it seems like they're pissed off, right? Like he wants Jay Powell to suck his rod. This person here had $115,000 to lose. How many people have $115,000 to lose? But to feel like you're so behind in life that you need to go and gamble it on the stock market, because I guarantee you he wasn't investing. He wasn't buying, blue chip stock, buy and hold. He was trying to 10x his money, guaranteed, and that's what you get. These things are not designed for you to win. It is exactly like a casino. And I do love WallstreetBets. I'm not putting down WallstreetBets because I come here for a good laugh, but I also don't take it seriously. This is like an advertisement. You come here and you see the winners and the losers, but you see a lot of winners, and it's an advertisement, and they're like going over their strategy and, we're going to short squeeze this, and, this is undervalued, and the news about that is coming. It's a bad way to be. And I think part of the issues are multiple. People are trapped in the dark psychology of scarcity. That's first. Of also, there's got to be like some sort of hopelessness to feel that like $115,000 is not enough for you. Like you need more than that to be important or something. Why would you do that? That's a lot of money. But anyways, that's not for me to decide. I'm just pointing out, we're going to come back to this, and we're going to find even more examples of this and discuss in depth about why they do that. Why do they do that? But here, let's get into the comments and have a laugh. I'm sorry for this person, but I'm going to laugh at them too. This guy, Jip Jive writes, impressive. Are you a moderator here? Only a mod could lose like that. That's so fucking funny. Jay Powell says, it is you who sucks rod now, my son. the guy, it's the original poster, writes, now I have two daddies. He says I got 10. The next guy writes, I have $10. It says you have 3 daddies. Oh man, let me get my highlighter on so you know where I'm looking over here. Any more good comments on this? This is what I'm saying. The dumb vampire girl says, I still don't get where y'all find 6 figures worth to lose money so easily. That's very unfortunate. You could almost, you could buy a business and finance. You could buy like a piece of a business and have the rest financed if you have the credit for that much money. Could have bought a fat stack of silver. Very unfortunate. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. All right, here we have a tweet from the real Kiyosaki, Robert Kiyosaki. Let me get this a little more centered so you can see. It kind of bugs me when I'm watching a video and it's not centered. Okay, he writes, why I no longer recommend real estate. In my 2022 book, Capitalist Manifesto, I stated that Marxists took over the U.S. in the 2020 election. Marxists will raise property taxes, impose rent controls, as rising interest rates decrease property values. I recommend gold, silver, Bitcoin. This is a really important point. I do think that real estate in a lot of situations is the best thing to hold, the best, especially, it's one thing if you're living on a property, but imagine you have some sort of income producing real estate. Not even that you're just renting it out, but maybe you're creating something on that. But this is the danger. You're like a sitting duck for the government to come and raid you, especially during times like this. And we're going to get into it a little later here. But this is a big part of there will be a default, but it's going to be a dishonest default. And part of that default is they're really going to be going after people that have assets like real estate. It's coming. Here we have a tweet from Gerald Salente. He writes, war, what is it good for? And here you can see this is just a daily chart of Lockheed Martin. And I do know that they had another weapons deal they went through today. And you just see this monster uptick in the price there. I'll recenter this so make sure it's easy to see. 9% in one day is a huge gain. Huge gain. All right, next up. Here we have a tweet from FX Hedge. Did it get deleted? Did my internet go down? FX Hedge writes, Dutch central bank urges pension funds to guard against UK-style crisis. One of the first thing that popped in my head when I read this one is that it does seem like they're framing this, there's some sort of intentional framing of this to be about the pensions. And we did find out later, even in the UK, it's the banks that are in the line of fire. It's not the pensions. The banks have been entrusted to invest the pensions, and they are the ones that manage all the underlying assets. And they repackage these bonds into instruments of investment. So it's all the banks, but they're calling it pensions. And I guess it's just to help the public just go along with whatever they decide to threaten the pensions in that way. But we should really be upset at the banks for mismanagement, right? But it's just to me, it's a subtle way that they're already reframing the argument to be about a crisis in the pensions rather than a crisis of mismanagement of money done by the banks. How do you feel about that? I think I'm right on the money on that one. You let me know what you think. I don't want to get too deep into this one, but I just wanted to put it on our radar. This article says America's going to shut down. If we shut down, the Mississippi River's water levels are near record lows, and it's wreaking havoc on one of the U.S.'s most critical supply chains. One thing that I want to say about this is I'm very aware of not just precious metals, but the base metals. I think about it. I read articles about it, about the rare earth metals. And I do think that those are going to be kind of the first thing to get really tight from like a real limited supply standpoint of a scarcity. Like there's actually a scarcity in the crust of the earth. I think we're going to see that in silver and some of those rare earth metals. But we know that water could be falling into that category. But that's just not one that I've not invested much time in figuring out the water situation. But I can't imagine anything could be more critical than the water. But I just don't know that much about it. But we're going to keep an eye on this one. Next up, we just have another thing to take note of here. And there's a lot of talks of inverted yield curves. And so there's all these different combinations of yield curves that could be inverted and whatnot. But this Charlie Biello here writes, the last 8 recessions in the US were all preceded by an inversion of the 10-year and 3-month treasury yields. That inversion occurred today for the first time since 2020, with the 3-month treasury bill 4.04% ending the day. So it ended the day. That's important. It didn't just touch that at some point. It ended the day with a yield 3 base points higher than the 10-year treasury bond at 4.01. So once again, and we'll see how it closes out. That's going to matter too, where in the week that it closes out. Here, I just got a simple chart for you. We're looking at home buyer demand collapsing, and that is pretty. And I think the reasons why are pretty obvious, but that did happen pretty quick. And from what my understanding is, that's a bar down. From my understanding too, is that there's quite a few homes that are still under construction at the same time. Hopefully this ends up a nice story for us stackers, where we do trade in our 500 ounces of silver for a fat pad. I think there's a good chance especially if we sell when we're supposed to sell, or are we never supposed to sell? I might not ever sell. Here I found a really basic thread on the BRICS nations, and I said, let's cover this because not every single person is going to be very clear about what are the BRICS nations. Let's read this real quick. Let's talk about BRICS and the big chance their new currency will take over the US dollar and become the US. Let's start over. Let's talk about BRICS and the big chance their new currency will take over the US dollar and become the world's reserve currency. 2. BRICS is an alliance consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, accounting for over 40% of the global population. I thought Iran was already in there. I guess not. 3. BRICS introducing a new currency for their countries means that 40% of the world will use their currency. The IMF estimates that by 2030, the BRICS nations are headed for 50% of the global GDP. Take that as you will. 4. The US dollar is backed by nothing, created out of thin air, and exporting inflation throughout the world. There's a big possibility that BRICS currency will be backed by gold, as since the first BRICS meetings in the countries have been buying up all the gold like there's no tomorrow, increasing the supply of gold by several thousand% each year. This does not include the $12 trillion worth of gold that was discovered in Uganda earlier this year. Now, who has been given a mining license to mine it? China, meaning they're going to acquire a lot more gold. This could mean for the first time in half a century, we can once again have a currency backed by real gold. That on its own would be pretty much instantly make it the most valuable currency on earth. And this did not account for new countries that may also join the alliance, like Iran, Argentina, Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. I think those are all shoo-ins. And then now we have Saudi Arabia saying, yeah, we want to join BRICS. Bad news. That's the worst news. Talk about a nail in the coffin. And most people didn't even hear that news. If they did, it flew right by them. But that was significant. Saudi Arabia saying they intended to join BRICS is a big deal. Here, continuing, by the way, when Saudi Arabia joins BRICS, they will probably accept BRICS currency as a payment for oil. And then what would happen to the dollar? If BRICS were to become the world's reserve currency, they would almost have an unmatched level of economic stability. Let's say if the United States economy falls, the US dollar is weakened as a result. As to if 5 countries were combined, this wouldn't happen. If the Brazilian economy takes a hit, the currency can still rely on the 4 other countries for economic stability. The US no longer have any power over their own money. And here we have a commenter. I'll just read this off. This commenter writes, a gold-backed currency is a daft idea, progressively dropped around the world since 1929 crash. It's too inflexible and can't fix problems like recessions. Oh, really?
Uh-oh, retard alert, class.
The world today isn't ancient Rome. Okay, dude.
He died swallowing his own vomit. Great. Now, he's not even a professional drunk.
It's a great idea, especially to launch the currency competitively. Ultimately, if you're a nation or you're a bank, you're much better off with the currency that you can create out of thin air because there's enormous leverage in that. But to launch a new currency, you will need something tangible backing it. And I do believe they will use a basket of currency along with the gold. because they don't need it to be 100% gold back. They just need enough gold back to say that it is, right? And another thing, I've heard it speculated many times already that there's indeed more gold in the Earth's crust than we think. And is that proof? I don't know. But we do know that the silver is being consumed and the gold is not consumed. The gold is stored away. Yet another reason I'm betting on silver instead of gold. And I do hope you're all aware of how much silver India has been buying. It's been crazy. Do we need to look that up real quick? Let's look that up real quick. All right, here's an old tweet from Wall Street Silver here, illustrating my point. As of August, India's silver imports in 2022 are already the 4th largest annual imports in history. With another 4 months to go, gold and silver continue to flow towards Asia as the US and Europe continue to artificially hold down prices. China and India are buying it up cheap. And I do know, I don't have the data to show you right in front of you, but I do know factually that the amount of silver that India has imported this year is just below, it's about 80% of the world's entire mining supply for 1 year. That's how much silver India is importing. They could theoretically buy up the entire mine supply of 1 whole year, all the mines around the world, with how much they've imported this year, or they're on pace to import this year already. All right, next up, here we have a tweet from John Basham. John Basham writes, the average American 401k retirement account has plummeted $34,000 this year alone in Joe Biden's economy. This is according to the Washington Examiner, who conducted a study on behalf of Committee to Unleash Prosperity. The two poured over data compiled by financial services and firms and found that since the start of the year, 401k plans have suffered more than $2 trillion in losses altogether. Whoa. The pair said that while the average 401k had more than 135,000 at the start of the year, those assets have shrunk to an average of 101,000. So the gentleman on WallstreetBets lost more than what's in the average person's 401k. Whew. I hope that dude has a good job. I think another important piece, I don't see right here. I think another important piece is that you have to consider the purchasing power of the money is down significantly to 9% minimum, maybe more like 15%. So you just got eaten up in 2 different ways if you have a 401k. Bad year. And we're going to talk about this more because I have an article to go along with this. But this is the dishonest default. The default is happening before you. This is the default on the debt happening before you. There's a possibility, and I'm always on the lookout for the cascading shocks the IMF warns of. We could have cascading shocks and illiquidity event. They'll say the financial system is illiquid, and we have these cascading defaults, right? And that's one way that it can go. But I'm sure the plan for the bankers and the governments is they're still going to default. Don't get me wrong. They're going to default, but they're going to use inflation and they're going to do it over time, and it'll be like a pressure valve. And this is really why you want tangible assets. You want gold and silver, and we're going to have to really fight against. They're probably going to want to try and tax precious metals annually. I would not be surprised. They're saying you owe us 5% just to hold it, because that's what they're doing in other European countries. So the model's there, but we got to fight tooth and nail. Imagine having to report that. It's bad enough with crypto, but for sure on crypto, they know every penny you got. And unless you went about it a really smart way, especially Bitcoin, you might as well have like a radio broadcast that shouts out to everybody every time you're spending or trading or doing any kind of transaction with Bitcoin. Here we have an article from RT, who's been on fire lately with the really great articles. And this says, Tehran is breaching nuclear deal. Who'd have thought? Tehran is breaching nuclear deal with drone supplies to Russia, according to the US. Moscow denies using Iranian technology, saying that it fields its own unmanned aircraft. The US on Monday accused Iran of breaching the conditions of the 2015 nuclear deal with the West by selling kamikaze drones to Russia. Moscow, however, stated it's only using Russian hardware. Russia has used autonomous loitering munitions to devastating effect in its attack on the Ukrainian military and energy infrastructure in recent weeks. Flying low altitude, these unmanned aircraft can evade traditional air defense systems before dive bombing. They're rumored to cost a fraction of the price of the missiles that Kiev forces fire to intercept them. I'm not surprised. This is... See, and we start thinking of super sophisticated weaponry, and I'm sure that, it has its place, but never underestimate the practicality of the Russians, the practicality. This is really something else, guys. And I have a feeling that this might be, you never know before a war starts, like what is the theme going to be? What is the theme of that era? And to me, this might be the theme, that it's not so much about big, huge bombs or biological weapons, but about these practical little drones that can target things and save. You want to save the infrastructure. That's the point of a war, is to save the infrastructure, keep it in place, and begin to tax and draw resources from. This is a war for resources, no doubt about it. Here's something that gets me pumped up, man. This is there's so many things going on that me too. I'm also deadened. I am also apathetic, somewhat passive, unexcitable, because there's so many things. But this is something that gets me fired up, man. Here we have a post from the Shrinkflation subreddit, and this one says, frozen chicken breast, 3 grams less protein, more sodium, all natural, has been removed from the packaging. And there you can have a closer look. This is chicken breast with rib meat, contains up to 15% chicken broth and salt. So what did they do? They probably loaded it up with more broth and more salt. I don't mind salt. I think salt is a good thing, but not their salt. You need like the right kind of salt. Then salt can benefit you. And the original poster wrote, just noticed an update in packaging and realized the nutrition label has changed as well. I like this for making crockpot shredded chicken, but I'll be going back to fresh. Yeah, definitely. So I would suspect that they're just being pumped up with more broth, and then the weight stays the same. But this is the most pernicious kind of shrinkflation. This disgusts me. I mean, if you have to pay more, then you got to pay more. But when they try and switch out ingredients, and especially when they're sticking seed oil in there, not good. And here we had a little bit of controversy. This is something that I also shared on my channel. We'll start with this one. And this is from John Benson, and he writes, the year-to-date annualized return for the 60/40 portfolio is the worst we've seen in 100 years. And so this is explaining that the mix between stocks and bonds, that deep blood red line there, it's been the worst year for stocks and bonds performance in history. Worse than the Great Depression, worse than the crisis in the 70s, the absolute worst. But one thing to note about this, it is year to date annualized. And so this other Twitter user was pointing out, hey guys, look, it's bad, but it's not that bad if you're using the year to date annualized. But if you're just going year on year, then you're actually okay. But I mean, not okay. That's not okay. That's awful. But it's not as bad as they made it sound, right? I don't know. Both are true, right? Once again, on the topic, on the dark psychology of money and our way of existence, we do see here that renting reaches its highest peak in 55 years. This is an analysis done. It's shared by Zero Hedge, but let's see who this is authored by Mike Shedlock via mishtalk.com. Why don't we go over to mishtalk.com? This looks like an excellent article, and I do want to follow this over here and hit that bookmarks button and give this fellow some credit for his excellent work here. Renting is at its highest level in half a century, with 43.7 million households renting. Population adjusted numbers are another matter. But what does it mean? Here you see Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, San Antonio, Phoenix, Raleigh, North Carolina, Miami, Denver, Indianapolis, Houston, Dallas, all the top renting cities. As many as 101 zip codes switched to renter majority the past decade. Renters surpassed homeowners in 41% of zip codes. Downtown areas became more popular for renters in 2020 compared to 10 years prior. 1/3 of this decade's renters say it's now a matter of choice. Okay, and I do understand that because you do get freedom from renting, and that is a big upside. That is one reason that I choose to rent myself. But this also, so there's that piece, but to me, this also goes back to the situation where we see us owning nothing. Like they like to say, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, some of it's by choice, but a lot of it's not by choice. And you find that even the money in your bank account, you think that it's yours, but it's just a debt note. You don't really own that. So what do you own? That's why it's extra important right now. Extra important to own your body. You got to own your body. It starts there, really. I'm hardcore on this one. Here we have an interesting article from Al Jazeera. Once again, I'm not going to dig too deep into this, but just a reminder, according to Al Jazeera, as the dollar soars, it spreads pain globally. A surging US dollar is making local currencies weaker and contributing to skyrocketing prices of everyday goods and services. The cost of living in Cairo has soared so much that security guard Mustafa Gamal had to send his wife and year-old daughter to live with his grandparents in a village 70 miles away, and it was just to save money. Gamal stayed behind working 2 jobs, sharing an apartment with other young people, and eliminating meat from his diet. So that's involuntary, so that he doesn't have money to have meat every day. He's probably living on mostly rice and veggies. He writes he's quoted as saying the prices on everything have doubled. There's no alternative. This is one of those times. I don't just read this stuff and pass over it. These are people. And this is where you sit back and you feel some gratitude in your heart. Especially if you're living in the West, or if you're like me, you're in America. I take meat I could have meat every day, completely take it for granted. And I don't think meat isn't healthy. So you can't tell me that it's perfectly fine to have lots of meat in your diet. It's a luxury though. It's a luxury. I have different feelings on sugar and processed flour and the motherfucking seed oils. Fuck those things. But having meat every day it's a luxury. And I love eating meat. I think we're slowly coming around to the truth, but it's not a bad day if for dinner all you have is some meat and some greens. That's a healthy diet. Around the world, people are sharing Gamal's pain and frustration. An auto parts dealer in Nairobi, Kenya, a seller of baby clothes in Istanbul, Turkey, a wine importer in Manchester have the same complaint. A surging US dollar makes their local currencies weaker, contributing to skyrocketing prices for everyday goods and services. This is compounding financial distress at a time when families are already facing food and energy crunches tied to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A strong dollar makes a bad situation worse for the rest of the world. Is this like a problem, reaction, solution situation? Are we going to start getting the news media preaching to us about sound money? And is it just because they want to break America and get us all on their central banking digital currency? And they'll always say, no matter what it is, they'll always say it's about justice and helping people. They would say that. There's nothing else. That's the playbook. It's always from the perspective of moral authority. They're just trying to do good. The dollar is up 18% this year, and last month it hit a 20-year high, according to the benchmark ICE US dollar index, which measures a dollar against a basket of key currencies. Dollar milkshake theory, the reign of the dollar, the iron-fisted reign of the dollar. I need a good tagline around that. Here we have a tweet from Unusual Wales. He writes, reportedly, an unconfirmed majority of UK Tory party members want Liz Truss to resign now and want Boris Johnson to replace her. That's the guy that just got replaced. And I did love this response. Activate Clown World. Activate Clown World vision. Everything looks exactly the same. That's good. Okay, next up. Oh man, I kind of want to get this tweet framed. Can this be an NFT? Hey guys, I think we may have let our governments issue too much debt. Oh, that's good. Maybe. Oh, look, Wall Street Silver replied, hey, we're never going to pay it back anyways, so don't worry about it. We're going to pay it back. That's what inflation is. Come on, Wall Street Silver, you know better. The inflation is the payback on the debt. 100%. Believe that. Okay, so I did see this tweet by FX Hedge here that says Deutsche Bank headquarters were raided by German prosecutors in a tax probe. Okay. What that means, I don't know, but I have seen different charts and information that are saying that Deutsche Bank is one of the more unstable banks because of their balance sheet. And I'm not really super great at looking at a balance sheet and know what I'm looking at, but I do know that they have some sort of situation where their debt to assets on their books is not very favorable for a bank. And also, it did make me want to revisit really quickly. I do have this chart here, and this isn't going to involve Deutsche Bank, but it's here for comparison. We get some perspective on it. But here, this is usbanklocations.com, and I don't know the quality of this information. It seems very detailed and it seems very like thorough, something that I could believe, but you know, I'm not a data scientist, right? So I did find this chart and it seems believable, but I'm not 100% like certifying it. But we do see here that JP Morgan Chase Bank, this is 57 trillion in derivatives on their books in one form or another. Goldman Sachs, 49 trillion in derivatives. Citibank, 45 trillion in derivatives. And this is why the prospect of cascading shocks throughout the system, like the IMF warned, is very real. And that is what we nearly had. Well, we did have it in 2008. And I do think that they probably, my guess is they do want to inflate their way out of this debt problem. But who knows? Maybe they will. Maybe it will be a controlled demolition. And it probably would look like cascading shocks at a time that they see fit, right? But just for comparison here, so we have JP Morgan Chase with 57 trillion in derivatives, and they're just a US bank. And my understanding is Deutsche Bank is like a world bank. Not that JP Morgan isn't a world bank, but Deutsche Bank is international, right? And we do see here, I wanted to just get some comparison. And so I went out and tried to find something about their derivatives. And this is from the Wall Street Journal. And it's entitled Understanding Deutsche Bank's 47 trillion derivatives book. The size of the figure can be misleading, but some of those assets are hard to value. Oh, so you have assets on your books that you're lending and borrowing against, and it's hard to figure out how much they're worth, guys. That makes a lot of sense. I want to invest in the financial instrument. I want some financial instruments in my portfolio where it's really tough to know their true value. That's some that's some wishy-washy speech right there. Shares in Deutsche. Okay, I don't care about the shares. This is an old article from 2016. Oh, it's from 2016. I wonder how much of that they've actually unwound. Okay, I'm glad I saw that. But I do imagine they're still carrying quite a bit of derivatives. Maybe I can search this again and see if I can come up with some more modern. It was like the first thing that popped up, but it could still be an old article, right? Okay, so here's a more recent article. And this one's from 2019. And this is stating Deutsche Bank has 48 trillion in derivative risk. And so I do assume that that number is still really high up there. I would believe that it's only higher since then. But again, that's something that I'll keep looking into. And this whole article here is just criticizing the amount of derivative exposure Deutsche Bank does carry. And I don't know exactly what that means, if it has anything to do with that, but it is concerning just in the sense that you see the headquarters being raided of a major bank like that, carrying so much derivatives that it makes you wonder if there is instability there in one form or another that basically affects everyone in this interconnected global markets, right? That's the only point I wanted to make. And here we do have just a little bit of footage. I don't know if there's a sound on this. Yeah. And we do see chaos in France. Once again, this has been like every weekend I've been seeing this every weekend for as long as I can remember. I mean, it was about the lockdowns and you had the yellow vests, and France really knows how to protest. But I do wonder, like, why is it that this Macron is just able to stick around. He seems like he's so hated and they just can't expel him. They can't expel him. He is like he's just lodged in there. More chaos in France. And here we do, this is a follow-up to, and this is our last article. This is our last article of the evening here. Oh, I got one more good one. Let's do one more after this. But we do confirm right here that Biden, it was speculation yesterday and today, now it's reality. Biden to release 15 million barrels of oil from the reserves.
Uh-oh, retard alert. Retard alert, class.
So that's about to be reality. And I wonder if this lets us know. Okay, they answered my question right here. It completes the release of 180 million barrels authorized by Biden in March that was initially supposed to occur over 6 months. This has sent the strategic reserves the lowest level that it's been since 1984 and what the administration has called a bridge until domestic production could be increased. So now they're increasing domestic production, eh? Oh my gosh, the reserve now contains roughly 400 million barrels of oil. Very concerning, guys, very concerning. Because now all you need is one more emergency, and then what happens? I do not like what I'm seeing there. And maybe I'm not the most qualified person, but in a way, it just kind of feels like common sense, doesn't it? And here we do have one post from Breaking Market News. They write, the deputy of Russian central bank, further increases in gold and forex reserves are now inappropriate. So they're deciding they have enough. I wonder why. What's that all about? And we did get this response from one of the users that says, you can read this as the world monetary system is crumbling and we aren't rocking it any further. Maybe. You can read it as it's time for these who were hesitant all those years to think about the directions of currencies against real assets. I don't know about that. Here, David Lee wrote, interesting statement. If Russia already achieved optimal position in gold, no need to buy more at an artificially low price. They would be happy to see if the gold price rises. I don't know. Last thing up, and this is a really lengthy article, and so I'll probably bore you to death if I read the whole thing, so we're not going to do this. But this article was recommended by Michael Burry. And I don't know who this guy is, but he seems really sharp. This is Russell Napier. He's an author of Solid Ground Investment Report and co-founder of the investment research portal called ERIC. He has written macroeconomic strategy papers for institutional investors since 1995. Okay, he sounds like a very qualified and intelligent dude. And here in this article, once again, a very lengthy article, he warns of a 15 to 20 year phase of structurally elevated inflation and financial repression. He shares his views on how investors should prepare for this new world. All right, let me take my time and pick out the most interesting parts of this for you. Okay, they ask him a question. In the summer of 2020, you predicted that inflation was coming back and that we were looking at a prolonged period of financial repression. We are currently experiencing 8% inflation in the Europe and US. What is your assessment on this? He responds, my forecast is unchanged. This is structural in nature, not cyclical. We're experiencing a fundamental shift in the inner workings of most Western economies. In the past 4 decades, we have become used to the idea that our economies are guided by free markets. But we are in the process of moving to a system where a large part of the allocation of resources is not left to markets anymore. So what he's saying there is the inflation is intentional. It's not just a phenomena of markets, or even so much that they've overissued currency to create this inflation, that they're actually getting as much as they want. And we'll get into the reason why they want inflation. It's structural, it's intentional. They ask him, why is this shift happening? The main reason is that our debt levels have simply grown too high. The total private and public sector debt in the US is 290% of the GDP. That's a whopping 371% in France and 250% in other Western economies, including Japan. The Great Recession of 2008 has already made it clear that this level of debt's way too high. He says that the debt to GDP has to go down. We cannot have so much debt. And so that they're restructuring it. And they ask him, why is this process triggered now? He says, my structural argument is the power to control the creation of money has moved away from central banks and to governments. By issuing state guarantees on bank credit during the COVID crisis, governments have effectively taken over the levers of control in the creation of money. Well, that is very interesting. I've always looked at like the bankers are the enemy, right? But if we do have this situation where the state is guaranteeing the money, and so he's saying by default, then they're in control if they're going to guarantee the currency, right? And he does state that because of one emergency after another, they've empowered themselves in this way. And they respond to that by saying, okay, so there's going to always be another emergency, right? And he's like, yeah, it'll be one emergency after another. Our governments don't retreat from these policies. Out of all the new loans in Germany, 40% are guaranteed by the government. In France, it's 70% of all new loans. And in Italy, 100% guaranteed by the government. This is a question, given that nominal growth consists of real growth plus inflation, the easiest way to do this is through higher inflation. They're talking about lowering the debt through inflation. He responds, yes. Engineering a higher nominal GDP growth through higher structural level of inflation is a proven way to get rid of the high levels of debt. That's exactly how other countries, including the US, the UK, got rid of their debt after World War II. Of course, nobody will say that officially, and politicians are probably not even aware of this. But pushing nominal growth through a higher dose of inflation is the desired outcome here. They ask him what level of inflation will do the trick. He says between 4 and 6%. Without the energy shock, we would probably be between 4 and 6% now. That's the level that the government can get away with. This is important. This is it. Financial repression means stealing money from savers and old people slowly. Man, there's almost not a good enough.
Each thing is a pyramid. Since time immemorial. Shit runs downhill, money goes up. It's that simple.
At the same time, this is another question. Yeah, at the same time, central banks have turned very hawkish in their fight against inflation. How does that square up? That doesn't make any sense. Today, we have a disconnect between the hawkish rhetorics of central banks and the actions of government. Monetary policy is trying to hit the brakes hard, while fiscal policy tries to mitigate the effects of rising prices through vast payouts. So monetary policy, if you didn't know this, monetary policy is what the central banks are doing, and fiscal policy is government. How it involves more economics, and monetary policy is just what central banks and banks are doing. But governments actually get to make laws and set policy about how money flows through the economy. And so that's what he means. Yeah, they are at odds. Oh, here we go. Governments will directly interfere in the banking sector by issuing credit guarantees. They're already doing that. That's too big to fail, right, guys? Too big to fail. They effectively take control of the creation of broad money and steer investment where they want to. And then the government would aim for a consistently high growth rate of money, aka inflation, but not too high to piss everyone off. Again, history will show us this pattern. The UK had 5 banks after World War II. And at the beginning of the year, the government would tell them by what percentage rate their balance sheet would grow. And by doing this, you can set the growth rate of broad money and nominal GDP. And so if you know that your real economy is capable of, say, 2% growth, you know the rest will be filled by inflation. This is amazing, guys. We're getting ahead of the curve right here. I don't know how much I believe this, but I'd probably say about 95%. This makes a lot of sense to me. Won't there come a point where the famed bond market vigilantes would step in and demand significantly higher yields on government bonds? He says, I doubt it. First, we already have captured the investor base. We have a captured investor base that just has to buy government bonds. And if push comes to shove, the central bank would step in and prevent yields from raising higher, with ultimate control policy being set over It'll be overt or covert yield control. We see that right now with the bank in UK, right? That was the whole interference in the yield. And we've also seen that in Japan. That's their policy. They're not allowing yields to rise. He predicts that the banks will not try and interfere because they're not capable of going to war with the government. Here's an interesting thought. This is so good, guys. Is this kind of like not the way that it was? I'm about to be a conspiracy theorist, okay? Isn't this move here that we're seeing kind of the opposite of where we thought we were going? I thought the banks were going to collect more power and everything was going to become more centralized. But it seems like as if nations are exercising their sovereign authority, yeah, but it doesn't quite work that way, does it? Because they're just bailing them out. I gotta chew on this. This is interesting here. I don't know. I don't want to say anything that I'm gonna regret. Okay, I'm gonna continue reading this article, and I'm glad this is from the market. What is this? Well, I gave you the man's name, and this is you can find it on the Michael Burry archives. I recommend reading this, and I'll give you the punchline. Okay, I'll give you the punchline on this. What he does say further down in the article, and maybe the most important part to me, is that, well, they ask him, like, how do you invest in this climate? And he does say that you will see that here it is. Here it is. First of all, avoid government bonds. This is a mega change in trend. Avoid bonds. Investors in government debt are the ones who will be robbed slowly. Within equities, there'll be sectors that will do very well. The great problems we have, energy, climate, defense, inequality, our dependence on production from China will all be solved with massive investment. I'm down to invest in energy. Uranium, anyone? This CapEx boom would last for a long time. Companies that are geared towards this renaissance of capital will do very well. Okay. And, here we go. He writes, gold will do well once people realize that inflation won't come down to pre-2020 levels, but will settle between 4 and 6%. I think this will be, we have to remember the history.
To heal, we must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember.
We have to remember this is what gold does, and it's done it since forever. And so to me, by extension, well, I think you get the best of both worlds by investing in silver, honestly, because it's interrelated to a lot of things here. Good shit. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the show. This was supposed to be a short show. What the heck happened, guys? I had too much fun today. I do appreciate you for joining me. And I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Psycho Silver. And I do hope, sincerely, that you are in good health. And if you're not in good health, I do hope that you get better soon. It's very important to me. And I thank you for joining me. And I'll be back very soon. You have a wonderful morning or night, wherever you are. Take care.